Hey up everyone, welcome to the Rugby League History channel. I hope you're all well on this Saturday. Tonight's video is going to be me Canterbury-Bankstown Bulldogs season review for the 2020 NRL season. Now I'm doing reviews of all the clubs. I've done Brisbane the other day and I'm going to be going from 16th place up to 1st place because obviously the teams up the top are still playing. But as for Canterbury, their season's over. They finished the season second last place, so I'm going to give you some of my opinions about their year, go through some of the matches and talk a little bit about next year. So before anything starts in this video, I just want to say that I am disappointed that Canterbury didn't come last this year. Being a Parramatta fan, I won't lie, I won't deny that fact. I'm disappointed. I was really hoping that Canterbury would come last. I think in some ways they deserve to come last. I know a lot of people have said that Brisbane deserved to come last, but I think Canterbury in certain patches of the year and on the table, at the final table, when you look at it, they were equally just as bad as Brisbane. You could see they didn't lose heavily as Brisbane, but they were still pretty poor in certain matches and in certain scenarios. So once again, for the fourth year in a row, Canterbury somehow avoid the wooden spoon. I think they must be allergic to it, but it's very disappointing from a Parramatta perspective. But I'm going to try to be as neutral as possible with this review, considering that Canterbury are my arch rivals. So before the 2020 season even started, Canterbury were already on the back foot because about 3 or 4 days out from the first match against us, season opener, Corey Horowira-Nairi and Jade Knockenbar were both in trouble with the schoolgirl incident up at Coffs Harbour, I believe. It cost him a $3 million sponsorship with Rashies, so they went into the year with 2 of their best players. Well, I think Ockenbar was quite a good player last year, and Corey Horowira-Nairi, in my opinion, was Canterbury's best player. Both of them were suspended and later deregistered by the NRL and the Canterbury club, and they also lost that sponsorship. So going into the first round of the year, the season's already in tatters. And they kicked off the year with a 6-point loss against us, 8 points to 2 they lost. And then it wasn't until round 4 that they finally got a victory over St George. 22 points to 2, but at that stage St George were playing quite poorly. One thing I will say about the Canterbury side this year, it reminded me a lot of the Parramatta side of 2018, where they weren't necessarily the worst team in the competition, even though Parramatta come last that year and even though Canterbury had come second last this year. At times, they didn't play like a club that was down towards the bottom. There's a lot of similarities between us in 2018 and Canterbury in 2020, where they were in front in matches. They had games sewed up. They had games where they should have gone on with it and they just couldn't hold on to a lead. And when we go through some of the games where they should have won, it started off in round 10. They were in a unlosable position against St George, and somehow they lost that 28 points to 22. They should have, I think, really beaten us in round 12, where they lost 18 points to 16. I mean, they come home with a wet seal in the second half, but they just couldn't find a way to the try line. The game against the West Tigers, where they were winning 28 points to 22 with only about 3 minutes left, and they ended up losing 29 points to 28. And then you had the following week, they lose to New Zealand when they were in front of that game. Same with Canberra, they were up in that match as well. The Gold Coast, you could see that was another game that they should have won. So that's about 5 or 6 matches there that they could have won. And if you look at the ladder at the end of the year, they could have been on 14 or 16 points, but they just couldn't find a way, win those games, and they couldn't find a way to seal them out. I think there's some games there where they obviously weren't in it, where they were getting thrashed. But I think comparing them to Brisbane, I think that they did much better in damage limitation. You could see they were in a lot of games, but they just couldn't find a way to close them out. Now, the game that saved them from the wooden spoon this year was the match against South Sydney, second last round of the year, round 19. They beat them 26 points to 16. Canterbury, they only won 3 matches this year. Same as Brisbane. They also beat Newcastle and they beat St George, but I'd see out of the 3 wins that they had this year, I think that this match against South was their best win. I think that they, from start to finish, were a better team in this game, and they deserved to win it. And as it turns out, it's the match that saved them from the wooden spoon, because just today we saw them lose 42 points to 0 against minor premiers Penrith. Now, if you look at the for and against, Canterbury and Brisbane both finished on the same amount of points. Canterbury finished on minus 222 for and against, Brisbane 356. And I said at the start, a couple of months ago, that Brisbane, those 2 games that they lost against Eastern Suburbs, and that game against West Tigers where they lost 48 and out, when I calculated it, that's over 150 points there. So those 3 games that Brisbane lost by that margin has saved Canterbury from the wooden spoon, because not only did they beat South, but that for and against was also quite shocking. But Brisbane, they just had a waste for and against in this case. Now, I think probably looking at all the results that they've had this year, I'd see probably the worst 2 results that they had all year, where when they were up 6-0 against West Tigers after 20 minutes and they ended up losing 34 points to 6. That was in round 7 of the competition. And then also, I'd probably see that their loss against Eastern Suburbs in round 5, where they lost 42 points to 6, was also a very bad day for Canterbury. I'm not going to include the 42 points to 0 loss against Penrith, because Penrith minor premiers going for 15 in a row, so we were always expecting Penrith to win that game. Now, if I'm gonna pick a best player of the year for Canterbury, it's a tough one, because there hasn't been too many players that have stuck out for Canterbury this year. I'd see one that played well was Kieran Foran. He was one that played well. I'd see that Aidan Tolman was another good player that they had this year, never gave up. Raymond Fatala Marinay was another one. So you could probably include Josh Jackson in that as well. But I'd see probably I'd probably give based on effort and based on what they've done for the club this year, I'd probably see Aidan Tolman's probably been their most consistent and their best player for 2020. I think it's been a tough year for Canterbury, and I think Aidan Tolman, he put in a lot of good performances. Even though Canterbury were getting beat, he was trying his hardest, and unfortunately for him, he's been released by the club at the end of the year. I don't know why. The thing with Canterbury is that I'm going to do a bit of a crystal ball now. So going into next year, they've released 8 players. A few of them I've already mentioned, Aidan Tolman, but also Kieran Foran's going, and Marcelo Montoya. It's a bit of a clear out sale at Canterbury at the moment. They've got Trent Barrett coming in next year. Steve Georgalis has been the interim coach, as we all know, for the last 2 or 3 months, because Dean Pearce stepped down from the role. He was under immense pressure. I think with Canterbury going forward in the next year, they need to get a better span, because I said at the start of the year in my NRL tipping video, you can go back and check that out. I see that Canterbury has one of the weakest spans in the competition, the least experienced spans in the competition. Now, occasionally, very, very rarely, you can have a weak span and you can do something about it. Like 2009 Parramatta, we had Jared Ian at fullback, but we had Jeff Robson 5'8", we had Daniel Martimer, and we had Matt Keaton as the hooker. So it wasn't the greatest spine in the world. But 9 times out of 10, if you have a weak spine, you're going to struggle in the NRL. Because if you look at some of the other clubs, they've got experienced spines. It's the most important combinations on the field. And I knew from the start of the year that Canterbury would struggle with that inexperienced spine. They've signed Luke Thompson mid-year from over here in England. So with a full pre-season under his belt and going in the next year, who knows, he might turn out to be a good player. They've signed Nick Kotrick for next year, which is a step in the right direction, but you have to understand that Nick Kotrick's a winger. He's not a 5'8" or a halfback, so they're gonna have to try to sign some players. But the problem is that when you've been at the bottom of the ladder for so long, it's hard to convince people out there to join your club when you're at the bottom, because they're gonna ask, what's in it for me? Besides the money, I want to join a successful club. I want to join a club that's going places. And for most players out there, they probably see Canterbury as a place where they're not going to grow as a player. They're not going to win the Premiership, so they're not going to want to go there. So I think, unfortunately for Canterbury, they're going to have to deal with the squad that they got at the moment. They're going to have to pee overs for some players, and they're going to have to win games. With Trent Barrett coming in as the coach, though, you have to remember this is a coach that's he nearly got Manly their first ever wooden spoon in 2018. So I think he's good as an assistant coach, Trent Barrett, but I think in the main role, I don't think that he's a great head coach. And I think Canterbury made a bad decision in appointing Trent Barrett. Maybe that might be proven wrong, I'm not too sure. But I think I'm not really predicting much for Canterbury for next year. I think it's going to be more of the same for Canterbury. They might finish a bit higher up the ladder. I don't think that they're going to get the wooden spoon, because I've kind of given up on that. Like I don't think that Canterbury's a club that wins wooden spoons very often. They seem to be a bit allergic to it. So I'm not really expecting much from Canterbury next year, but rugby league's a funny game and anything can happen. But that's me informal review of the Canterbury-Bankstown side for their 2020 season. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, click that like button. Comment in the section below, let me know your thoughts on the review. If you are enjoying the channel, click that subscribe button and click that notification bell so you get an email when I do a new video. Anyways, everyone, I'm going to get out of here. And stay tuned for me Update of the Week video coming up tomorrow. Alright, catch you all later. Tatty bye.